This show contains language that is unsuitable for children.
Grant us love filled with good intention. May we find peace in the midst of dissension. We not what they make us, though they try to break us. And say we love us, giving love. This is how
Hey, and welcome back to Giving Myself Permission. This is a space where we're learning to speak truth to fear, giving our sacred expressive life force, ourself, permission to reveal our inherent truth. I am your host, Dr. Pennie Murray. Today's episode is about honoring the duality of our existence, how we are both wounded and powerful. We're also going to be talking about how important it is to rest with purpose, and how that resting with purpose is preparing us for radical rebuilding. I don't want to just even say rebuilding because I don't like this shit the way it's going now as it relates to African Americans and our existence in this system. I want us to be involved in radical building, so we have the equity that we need in order to live more freely and flourish in this landscape. I'm reminded of a quote by Richard Fuller as something that's so critical during this time. He says, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And that's why I say, I don't want us to rebuild shit. They can have all this. The same way I feel about when people say, God's going to give me back everything the devil stole from me. Let the devil take that shit. Because if he could easily take it, I don't want it. I want something new. This episode is brought to you by the Learning Spa Cultural Inner Wellness Retreat. It's my vision for a revolutionary space where inner wellness is a proactive commitment, not a reactive liability within the African American community. And even though we're still in the early stages of research and development, you can help us turn this vision into a reality by visiting penniemurray.com. That's PennieMurray.com to learn more about my vision and how you can donate to our building efforts. I hope you will do that. Because again, this is a time in which we have to truly support each other and build this new model. As always, we want to start with a sacred pause. I started doing the sacred pause simply to kind of settle myself, to remember stillness is a strategy. We've been so conditioned to romanticize the struggle, hustle, grind culture. We're just caught up in it and we glamorize it. Now, some people can thrive on that kind of energy. However, it's unhealthy, and we weren't created to sustain that level of energy long term. But for most of us, if you like me, I tried to do that back in my younger years, but I am older now and I know better. So they say, when you know better, you do better. Hopefully that's what you do. But for most of us, the hustle culture, it keeps us disoriented and stuck in a state of constant survival mode. And that is just not healthy. So before the noise, we need to start listening to the knowing. The sacred pause that we're reflecting on now is a statement from Rumi called The Human Gift. Rumi says, "Let your heart be honored and loved by you. And then imagine that you can crack open a window in the dustiest chambers of your own heart's temple to let the breeze of the divine flow through." Often we carry so much in silence. I watch so many of us Black women and the Black culture in general just carry so much in silence. And then when we do open up and say something, it's usually the straw that broke the camel's back, and it's in the most inappropriate time. So we carry it all in silence, the weight of old disappointments, the ache of trust betrayed, the quiet fear that maybe we've missed our moment, or that love, true nourishing love, is for everybody else, just not us. We trust in our fears, and then we struggle with giving our human self permission to trust in love. But when we finally stop running and start listening, we hear it. A whisper behind the walls that we built or the caves that we hide in. It's not somebody else calling us or whispering to us. It's our own sacred expressive life force, our true self within. When I finally decided to just crack the window open just a little bit in my heart, I'm not talking about years ago. I'm talking about maybe a few months ago when I just cracked the window open just a little bit and I let the grief that I had stuffed down come out. I said, okay, you know what? I'm doing this on purpose. So I'm going to let this come up, and this will be the last time that I grieve like this. This is how we shed the old grievances, the outdated armor, and the survival stories that keep us locked out of our own hearts. I'm learning to give myself, my sacred expressive life force, permission to walk this path, not as someone who has it all together or figured out, but as someone willing to live fully, to cry when it hurts, to speak truth to fear, even when my voice shakes, to trust that the divine oneness loves me in this moment, even in the mess I might find myself in, even in the fear when I've forgotten to recognize my strength. I'm learning to give myself permission to embrace my whole self, not as a problem to be fixed or a test to pass, but a divine adventure. Even if I am scarred, and yes, I'm scarred in some places, but if I can admit that, then I must also admit something else, that I am cherished, that I am held by the ancestors, and that I am profoundly trusted by divine oneness to carry out the task that I have been assigned in this physical form. So let your heart break again, but this time on purpose, because within that breaking is release, a clearing, a sacred moment where we make room for love. Not the perfect Hollywood depiction of love, but the real kind of love. The kind that reminds us we are both human and divine, both shadow and stardust. So if today feels heavy, crack open the window just a little bit. Let the breeze of love flow through and blow out that dust that's in your heart in its furthest, deepest corners. Let the doubt drift out. Let your heart feel the light. Let love find you again. And if fear does rise or doubt challenges you, don't silence it. Sit beside it. Be curious about it. Just question anything that comes up, but with compassion. Because when things come up, you want to be able to speak truth to that fear, truth to that unsettled question. We are worthy of love. We don't have to chase it. And our story, it's still unfolding. It's still sacred. It's still ours to live. We are the living intersection of mystery and meaning. And our journey, our real, raw, sacred journey is beyond our description. We don't have the reference points to really begin to relate to what's really in store for us, at least not yet. Remember, stillness is a strategy. That felt good. That really felt good. It settled my mind because when I get on here, listen, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to confess something. I started out saying, I got to do something in this gap to encourage people in this crazy shit show that we're in. But as I began to prepare for it, I'm seeing it as just kind of like, for me, I think I told you this last episode that Spirit told me that I had gotten lazy, comfortable. And so now it's time for me to stretch this voice again, to exercise it. And so today's episode, the title of the show, Two Truths and One Legacy. I love this because we all try to make like there's not a tug-of-war that goes on inside of us. Wounded yet powerful. Two truths, one legacy. The two truths that dwells within me, one is compliant to the system and one is defiant. Now, both live in the same body, in the same bloodline, and both shaped a legacy that is as bold as it is burdened. See, in many of us, there lives a obedient child, but there's also a freedom fighter beneath that obedience, whispering, something's wrong with this here thing. This is not where it's supposed to be. And this is really not me. I'm not feeling comfortable here in this space. But both are true. Conformity and defiance both live inside us. And if we're being honest, both, as I said, have shaped us. It has made us who we are. This episode is for those of us carrying the weight of our inherited weaknesses, the wounds, the warnings, and the warrior within. I'm talking to those of us we've been made to feel too wounded to take ownership of our calling and yet too strong to be content with mediocrity. This is the inner tug-of-war that we kind of deal with on a daily. And some of us try to anesthetize it through relationships, drinking, and other self-sabotaging behavior because we don't want to acknowledge that other part of us that wants to live out loud as well. But what if we were to speak truth to the fears that keep us shackled to a false narrative? What if the wounds we bear give breadth and depth to our calling? What if we gave ourselves permission to rest with purpose, to nurture our pain points, not just for the sake of relief or disengagement, but as a revolutionary act? I want to explore those questions a bit in this episode. But before we get started on that, I gotta do my 2 cents. I like to see this segment as invoking the energy of the ancestors and honoring Black History 365. They gave their self permission to break the mental chains and free their voices to bring healing and light to the world around them. And we, as the ancestors' heir, we have an obligation to carry on what they themselves were able to finish. All right. So the ancestor that I want to feature today is the reluctant fire of Bayard Rustin. Now, I didn't know anything about this dude until I watched the movie. It was a series on Disney, and it was MLK/X. And it was talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and some of the background story behind that. I never knew anything about, because, we just don't learn a lot of that, especially when I was coming through school. And even when I went to college, you had to be intentional about African studies, but there was even little that was given to you or available for you to learn as related to African American history. But in the hubbub that surrounded the civil rights movement, Bayard Rustin was a man who moved mountains in the shadows. Rustin was affectionately referred to as Mr. March on Washington. He was a mentor, close advisor, and strategist to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Rustin was constantly telling Dr. King that nonviolence was more than a political act. It was a spiritual practice. He was born March 17th, 1912. Born the same year my grandmother was. Wow. He was one of 12 children raised by his grandparents in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And Rustin's lifelong commitment to nonviolence began with his Quaker upbringing, the influence of his grandmother, and his later years of studying Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence. But Rustin's reluctance to be front and center in that civil rights movement wasn't always by his choice. You see, Bayard Rustin was a reluctant hero in my mind, not because he lacked conviction, but because he knew his very existence made people uncomfortable. And it's some shit when you realize, you know, that you have to take a back seat, diminish your light in order to make comfortable the fragile egos of others. And why was he having to do that? Well, because he was Black, he was openly gay, and he had been imprisoned as a conscientious objector, where they had claimed, there was claims of him being a former affiliation with the Communist Party. Of course, back then they were accusing everybody to be communists, anybody that they wanted to shut down or silence their voice. In his duality, Rustin was deeply spiritual and deeply radical. He stood at the intersection of too many identities to be embraced as the public face of the civil rights movement. And so he decided to stay in the background in order to, he did not want the movement to be sacrificed because of what the labels that people were putting on him. He worked behind the scenes, making shit happen. Everybody is not meant to come out here big and bold. In the whole civil rights movement, there was people who literally was doing some of the background work, the logistical work that made that shit happen. Rustin's accolades are many. He was instrumental in forming the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, in 1956, organizing the 1957 prayer pilgrimage for freedom. He coordinated the 1958-1959 youth marches for integrated schools. In 1963, when A. Philip Randolph began organizing the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, Rustin was appointed deputy director of the march, where he got his name, Mr. March on Washington. Now, Rustin once said that we need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers, and yet he never truly sought to be seen as one. This is John Lewis and his creed, Good Trouble. Angelic troublemakers. I love that. I love that. He was a behind-the-scenes warrior, a reluctant leader, a man who often questioned painfully whether his presence would be more harmful than helpful to the movement that he was so passionate about and the people he loved. You know, Rustin helped draft much of Martin Luther King's memoir titled Strides Towards Freedom. Yet he would never allow his name to be credited in the book. He was quoted as telling an associate that he says, "I did not feel that he should bear this kind of burden." He being Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the burden that he was speaking of was all of the labels that was attached to him, the negative connotations of him being a Black and openly gay man. And it was hurtful for him. Having to be that reluctant warrior, he still led. He organized. He changed the course of American history. That's the essence of the reluctant hero, a person who has every reason to shrink, every excuse to step back, but something deeper, ancestral, divine won't let them quit. And that's what I feel is going on right now, even with myself. I've been doing a lot of running from what I know I'm called to do. But in researching people like this have emboldened me to step out despite my nervousness or the shakiness in my voice. Bayard Rustin is the embodiment of two truths and one legacy. He carried the burden of exclusion and the blueprint of inclusion. He bore the wounds of rejection and the weight of responsibility. He was afraid, and still he answered the call. And that, family, is what it means to not retreat into invisibility, but to gather strength in the quiet, to prepare not to be seen, but to be effective. Rustin Life said to me, this is the world according to Pennie, okay? He said to me that you don't have to be fearless to be powerful. You don't have to be center stage to be transformative. You just have to show up whole, wounds, doubt, brilliance, all of it. That's whole. That's the whole of us. Many times when we think about being whole, we think we got to get all our shit together. We got to be cleansed and perfect and sanctified and all that other shit. What basically whole means, I'm bringing all of that to the table. Wounds, doubt, brilliance, all of it. And I'm going to work this shit out as I go. Just to close this out, as African Americans, I'm going to say this again and again until I turn blue in the face. We carry the weight of history, the trauma of stolen lives, broken promises, and forced inferiority. But here's the thing. We also carry something more powerful within us, a sacred expressive life force that has endured, adapted, and thrived against all odds. In this current shit show that we're facing, it's time to engage in restful healing, because our next move is to move from thriving to flourishing. We are here at this time on purpose for purpose.
But you gotta stay focused. Yeah, you gotta stay focused. I swear you gotta stay focused. Cause they gon' say you can't. They gon' say.
All right, I'm gonna get into, let me see if I can find the questions again. Oh, I know. The questions were, what if we were to speak truth to fear that keeps us shackled to a false narrative? First question, what if the wounds we bear give breadth and depth to our calling? That's critical right there for me. And what if we gave ourselves permission to rest with purpose, to nurture our pain points, not just for the sake of relief or disengagement, but for revolutionary act? Those are the questions that I kind of want to explore as I go through all of this. So stay with me, because you know what? I love telling stories. And so I'm going to start right here. I got 4 different stories to kind of tell you, and I'm going to kind of rope it in all together. But it was 2013, and it was President Obama's re-election. No, not 2013. Well, it was 2013. I'm getting my numbers all mixed up. But anyway, it was his re-election. That was this is the background. The energy of that time was hopeful, but yet anxious. But we have to also recognize that there were others, Republicans, who were sure that the election of a first African-American president was a fluke. And they had been working nonstop to ensure he was going to be a one-term president. Now, I believed it was possible, because the energy from the 2008 election was still lingering. And so the people that I was talking to, they were all hyped about it, still engaged. But then I was watching a cable news show regarding the re-election, and they were asking some guests on the show what they felt about the election and whether they felt that African Americans would come out and vote for President Obama as they did in his first election. And a guest on the show, it was an African-American woman lawyer, and her response was quick. And she said, no, African-Americans are too broken and needy. They won't show up like they did before. I'll never forget that. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Her response, that triggered me, and I got pissed off. Not because she was necessarily wrong. I mean, that was her opinion. I didn't know whether she was right or wrong, because in my mind, it was possible. I got pissed off, I think, because she said it as if it was a verdict, like she had already written African-American voters off, and our resolve was no longer worth believing in. And so as I sat with that, and I kept trying to figure out why in the hell was I getting so pissed off about what she said? That's her opinion. And I started to question whether I was looking at the state of African American psyche through a rose-colored glasses. And I kept asking myself that. And I started thinking, when did we stop seeing ourselves as worth betting on, believing in? Her response stayed with me for a long time. And then I came across a research article that clarified why the lawyer might have said what she said. Let me sum up what the article was really said, because I'm not going to go through that whole damn article. It said that the African American struggle is rooted in an identity crisis. And this identity crisis is the result of being a stateless people, lacking lawful education, nationality, and autonomy of self-governance. When I was reading the article, of course, it was much more. I'm just summing up what they basically were saying. And as I just started thinking about it, did this lead to a collective forced amnesia that made us forget we were powerful by design? So now here I am. The woman lawyer says, no, we won't show up to vote like we did before because we were too needy and too broken. And then this article kind of, validates what she's saying in a sense, that brokenness and neediness was a struggle rooted in identity crisis. It spoke of the psychic fracture we inherited, the silent scream that lives under our skin. That's really what President Obama once said when he was a senator. He defined that silent scream as a quiet riot. That's why I was going to name this particular podcast Quiet Riot, because underneath the skin of every African-American person is the silent scream, regardless of whether we recognize it or not, it's there. But I moved to giving ourselves permission because that's the end goal, that we begin to change the narrative and give our sacred expressive life force, our true power voice. Okay, first two stories. Fast forward a year later, I'm standing in the checkout line at Costco's. My favorite store, y'all. Okay, I'm so proud to be a Costco member. But anyway, I'm standing in the line waiting for my turn to be checked out. And if you've gone to Costco's, you know how the operation, the procedures are as a member and blah, 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 blah. As I'm waiting my turn, I'm watching this white male employee at the end of the checkout line handing out some kind of coupons to everybody who was in front of me. And everybody who was in front of me was either a white family or Indonesian family or Indian family. But as I got to him, got my stuff all checked out and everything and put it in the basket. He just stood there stoically. And the person who literally was ringing my items up, he was the one who helped me put my things in my basket so that I could leave the store. The other person that was handing out the coupons, like I said, he was just standing there stoically and he didn't offer me anything. Well, then that old conditioning kicked in and I didn't bother to say anything. I just kind of dismissed it as possibly he didn't give it to me because I didn't have the right membership level, because at Costco, there's different membership levels that you are on. And so I just thought, well, maybe that's the reason why he didn't give it to me. But while I dismissed it, Divine Oneness had a message for me. So as I'm leaving the store, okay, I'm leaving the line. I wasn't leaving the store. I'm leaving the line. The person that had checked out, that had scanned my items, was helping me put my stuff in a basket. And as I started to walk away, this woman that was sitting right across in the food court, she ran up and I almost hit her with my basket. And she said, sir, and she's talking to the white male employee that was handing out these coupons. And she said, sir, I've sat here for over an hour and I watched you. Whatever you're giving out, you're giving it to everybody else except for Black people. And she said, I just want to ask, why did you not give it to her? Well, I stopped because like I said, I almost hit her with my basket. She wasn't aggressive, but she said it with unwavering clarity. She saw what she saw and she was addressing him about it. And so then he starts talking loud and making a scene. He goes, so are you accusing me of being racist? And I stopped and I said, she didn't say that. She didn't call you a racist. And so he kept going on about, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. And then he's rambling some stuff. I don't know what the hell he was saying. And then he says, I'm not a racist. My girlfriend is Asian. And I looked at it and raised my eyebrow and I said, you know what? For you to say that and have to clarify that, you are a racist. And so as I watched and we kind of just left because he got louder and I was like, oh my God. So she just walked away, went back. She said, sir, I was just telling you. And I noticed that and I was bringing that to your attention. She went back over and sat at the food court with her family. I went on and got my little receipt checked and I went to walking outside. Well, as I got outside, I hear this ma'am, and as I turn around, here's this woman again that I had almost crashed with my shopping cart. She was apologetic about dragging me into that. I said, no problem. She said, I saw what was happening and I just could not sit there and not say anything. She said, I've been sitting there for over an hour and my husband told me not to say anything, but I just couldn't. She said, I'm a Native American. And some of us from our tribe, we came here from Oklahoma because there's not a Costco's in Oklahoma. And everybody was telling us about the Costco experience. And we wanted to come here and experience it. And I sit there and I watched that. She said, and I just couldn't let that go. And then she says, you know what? There has been a long held belief among many Native American tribes that your people were always meant to be in power. And that someday you all would remember who you are and find your way. And then she said, I want you to have a great day. And I hope to see you. I hope to see you again or something like that, she said. I was stunned. I didn't even know how to hold that because part of me lit up inside and it was saying yes. And I could feel my little self having a power dance. And we are meant to be in power because this bullshit we're dealing with is fucked up, And so, but another part of me froze because power for us has always been dangerous to assert. 2 truths, 1 legacy. All right, hold on. Then last Thanksgiving, 2024, my daughter sends me this video to watch. And I'm going to mess this name up, but I'm just going to say it anyway. The video from Native American shaman, and her name was Mother Bear, and she was a part of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. I practiced that, y'all, and I still might have messed that up. But anyway, she was describing what really happened on that so-called Thanksgiving harvest day between the Wampanoag tribe and pilgrims in November 1621. But you know what? Instead of me saying what she said, I'm gonna let you listen to her.
I'm the 7th grandmother back from Mother Bear. People that know about our culture know that that's an important connection because each generation is to provide for the 7th generation ahead. And a lot of your ancestors are willing to come in and help you if you invite them in and as long as you honor them. But today I'm here to talk to my own people. I'm here to tell you it's time to decolonize your mind. First, let me tell you every day is Thanksgiving Day. Starting with, I woke up this morning, thank you. The whole purpose of life is to be in a constant state of thanksgiving. I know that a lot of our young people are confused and angry and discouraged, and we feel for you, we hurt for you. A lot of that has to do with the situation in the world today, but you're also being doubly taxed by the what they call intergenerational trauma. Trauma that happened to your ancestors is passed in the DNA, and you feel it too. A lot of you are turning to drugs and alcohol to try to block this out. It doesn't work. A lot of you are also so colonized that you're using the N-word a lot. Do you realize that there was an agreement made between our people way before the people without color got here? The black people agreed that they would sacrifice and do the slavery thing for us, or we would have been completely wiped out. We owe them such a debt. Don't be caught up in American racism. They don't want us to unite and be together because they're afraid that we'll treat them the way they treated us.
Now, I hope you guys heard what I heard. She said that there is a spiritual agreement made between our people and the black people before the white man came. The black people agreed to sacrifice and do the slave thing for us. Otherwise, we would have been wiped out. She was validating what that Native American woman told me almost 22 years ago in that Costco interaction. And again, I didn't know how to hold that. I was like, what the hell? Not because it sounded strange, but because it validated what the Native American woman had told me years ago. Now, she said the 1621 was the Thanksgiving harvest, all right? Remember, African Americans were brought here forcibly in 1619. The Thanksgiving thingy happened in 1621. But I'm thinking, I don't think she meant that The black folks off the ship of 1619 met with the Native American tribe and sit down and smoked a little peace pipe and then agreed to take on slavery. I think that it was done from a spiritual level. It was ancestral. It was a covenant before time was time as we know it. That's why I think that while we lament over slavery, maybe in a spiritual sense, we agreed to that to be able to save so many other. I don't know. I'm just simply putting that out. That's the things that I'm still exploring. All right. And I couldn't help but feel the sacred weight of that agreement, because if we in fact did in spiritual form agree to do that, think about what our ancestors have gone through, the weight that we continue to endure. Even if I didn't fully understand it, I began to appreciate that there is something divine about the African American journey. And we have forgotten that truth. Maybe a more accurate statement is that we have never, ever even connected with that truth. Maybe we haven't even considered that. Following the recent election, I was wrestling with my efforts to establish a facility prioritizing inner wellness within the African American community. I was wrestling with how what I was trying to do might align with the needs of our people. And I didn't understand the assignment, and I thought it was this and I thought it was that, and I skipped around and I did all this other stuff when Spirit was basically leading me back to this very thing. I had had these experiences and Spirit was trying to remind me of our sacred journey and that we needed to connect to that journey again. We cannot disregard the effect that intergenerational trauma has had on us and how it has wreaked havoc on our psyche. The thing about it is that the trauma that we face as African Americans, we never know when that shit's going to pop off. And so we're always on the ready, and that makes us anxious. This whole intergenerational trauma, the racism and the microaggression and all this shit that we have to deal with, it doesn't just hurt. It confuses us and it deadens us. So we become apprehensive warriors. Not because we lack power, but because we've been taught to fear our power. But it is our responsibility, based on these experiences that I've had, I'm sharing this with you so that we understand there is a sacred journey that we are making. And we got to start taking our lives seriously. And we really got to be honest with ourselves. We do need to heal. And that's not a bad thing. We've been conditioned to mistrust ourselves, to be suspicious of our true inner wellness. We're just happy that we're surviving. That shit ain't cute no more to me. We've been conditioned to believe that restful healing is a betrayal to our role as subjugated beings. Miss me with that shit, because I'm not doing that. So let me just kind of connect all this. 2 truths, 1 legacy, reclaiming our power as rested warriors. In the Black community, we are bombarded with messages about being on our grind. And it's all about the hustle culture, to the point that we, as I said earlier, have romanticized it. But here's an alternative mindset that I think we need to really begin to embrace in this current landscape. That rest is more dangerous than rebellion. You can see it now, where white folks are kind of like, we out here marching, where the Black people? I remember somebody saying that, when you say nothing, when people are going off and you just stay quiet, that's more scared. They scared because they don't know what you're thinking. And that's what this reminds me of, because rest is more dangerous than rebellion. Healing is more radical than hustling. And stillness is sacred. To rest with purpose means reclaiming the parts of us that capitalism, racism, generational trauma have historically tried to destroy, and are right now trying to erase and bury the legacy of our resolve. To rest with purpose means pausing long enough to strategize on ways that we can refuse to let our legacy be minimized, dismissed, or reduced to pain, both individually and collectively. So let's talk about what the manifestation of resting with purpose really looks like. Senator Cory Booker's over 25-hour Senate floor marathon speech, April 1st, 2025. And he didn't talk no crazy shit like I've seen people do filibusters before. They be reading kiddie books and all this other shit. Senator Booker and his team laid it out with facts and information. It wasn't no bullshit. He was on point, resting with purpose. That's the manifestation of it. Then Vice President Harris, she was in the practice of resting with purpose. And recently she spoke out for the first time in months at a women's summit in California. Now, let me just say this. I've kind of shifted my belief about the 92%er mentality. And I say kinda because on one side of the coin, it is advocating resting with purpose. Let me go back and say, I really want to get this out, and I wanted you to understand what I'm trying to say here. Racist political rhetoric really overshadowed the call for rest that was put out a few years ago with the Black Lives Matter movement. At least to me, that was the core message I got from the movement. That march was about, we want to rest our psyche, our hearts, our minds, our bodies from the fear of being accosted or murdered by the police. We want rest. We want to rest in safety. We want equality. Let us be fabulous and stop screwing up our lives and shit, you know? That was just me. I felt that was the first call for rest. Let us rest with purpose. And it was overshadowed. It wasn't heard. But ironically, the universe tilted the scales. And now here we are, taking the well overdue rest we've been historically denied. And so that's why I say, yeah, I'm down with the 92%ers mentality now a little bit. But here's my caveat. The 92%er mentality also showed me something. It shows me that we have the power to reclaim our narrative and demand better because we are disciplined enough to act in resistance to the expectation to save the white folks. Everybody's calling, where are the black folks? Where are the black folks? Well, if we have the discipline and we can sit out and sip, we also have the discipline to begin to strategize in this rest moment. The universe has given us this period. But the question is, are we willing to assert this power in every aspect of our lives? 2 truths, 1 legacy, reclaiming power as rested warriors, as we saw demonstrated by Senator Booker, Vice President Harris, and so many others moving in defiance is evidence that they were resting with purpose, getting their strategies mentally and emotionally together so that I can be seen and heard without the filters of my wounds. In this timeout that the universe is giving us, we're being called to rest with purpose so we can heal. So when it's our turn, like Senator Booker and Vice President Harris and so many others that stood up and that answered the call when it was their time and they stepped into their spot. We have been wounded by a world that fears our light, but our power is revealed every day because we keep showing up anyway. But if we hold to the wounds while simultaneously trying to move forward, all we accomplish is the 1 step forward, 2 step back dance, which amounts to standing still. We have to give our conscious self permission to remember who we are. This has got to be at a soul level, that the power that we have is to heal individually and then collectively, to move beyond just surviving this racist system of disregard. Hell, my goal is to encourage us to stop aspiring for the ability to thrive in this country. Instead, our aspirations should be focused on flourishing. That's our next move. I go back to the Native Americans' belief about our power. There is something divine about the African American journey that many of us have never connected with, and we've got to find our way. a people who are no longer afraid to be whole and powerful, unapologetic. Remember what I said whole was? We come to the table with all our shit, but we own it. I'm going to come to the table saying that, I've been kicking the can around because I was afraid of being judged. That's my whole shit. Now I'm out here going to do this and get better at this. Anyway, while we're in timeout from the protests and the marches, we need to be about restful healing. I'm going to keep saying that. I'm going to keep pressing that. So we can give our conscious self permission to embrace the assignment our experiences have shaped us for. Every damn thing we've gone through, y'all, as an individual, all that shit, it was for purpose. Rest is not quitting. Rest is where sacred warriors go to hear instructions of our sacred expressive life force. Now, I'm just going to tie in that cultural pride for me. Because when I was younger, I used to romanticize over what it would be like to participate in the civil rights movement, being a part of the Black Panther movement. I thought that was so cool. But I'm the byproduct of an inner energy governed by two gospels: the gospel of compliance and survival, and the gospel of righteous indignation and rebellion. In my DNA are two opposing energies. I was raised to conform to prioritize peace of fragile egos of white America. But the other part of my DNA is radical defiance. In the household that I was raised in, my mother and my grandmother, both single women raising children, had the social compliance mindset that even if you disagreed, you knew that speaking up against the white majority would lead to hostility, exclusion, and maybe even death. So to avoid further psychological trauma-inducing conflict, to fit into the white social system, they capitulated. It reminds me of the movie The Butler, where you had the father who worked in the White House for so many years, kept his head down, didn't rock the boat. But then there was the son that was rebellious, and they were constantly butting heads as the son grew older and became more and more radical. But the core ideal that my mother and my grandmother raised us in was to prioritize safety by conforming to the stay in your place social system, even though they might have resented it. And I know they did. As I think back, I realize the resentment and the bitterness that my mother and my grandmother had. It wasn't just because of the choices they made, but it was because of the system that they were forced to live in. The atrocities of Jim Crow era shaped my parents. Laws that said even if you had something to say, you had to swallow it whole because your life depended on it. So my mother and my grandmother passed that same vigilance on to me and my four sisters. They learned to trade authenticity for safety, and that trade over time became mental shackles that they were never able to break. But on my father's side, that part of my DNA, I didn't know. I didn't grow up with a relationship with my father or my father's side of the family. That same Jim Crow era pushed them to be defiant. My uncle was a part of the Black Panther movement, and my aunts were active key members in the NAACP. And I didn't know this until I was well in my, mid-20s, late 20s, something like that. And as I grew older and became more involved with my paternal side of the family, they were proud of being able to push back against a system of inequality and inequity. I love the fire that my paternal side of the family had, but I was never quite sure how to nurture it and how to hold it because I just didn't have that relationship with them. And though I was raised with the stay in your place and you're to be seen, not heard mentality, what was also stirring in my DNA was the spirit of defiance. I was taught to play it safe, but I was wired to challenge the status quo. And that drove my mother crazy. And she tried her damnedest to break me, but never was able to do that. Never was. And so here I am, living in the space between two truths. I am the legacy of conformity and compliance, and I am the legacy of resistance. I've learned to embrace this contradiction within myself, because the truth is, You can be wounded and powerful. You can be afraid and chosen. You can be unsure and unstoppable. These conflicting truths, these echoes of realities live in me. They live in you. We are the physical expression of inherited spiritual agreements that are older than the soil we walk on. We have inherited wisdom that flows through our DNA, unlike anybody else. And right now, you and me, us, we are the ones standing at the threshold to preserve our legacy and our progress. We are the bridge between what was and what must be. We are the ones who must redefine power, not as domination, but as divine assignment, not as performance, but as innovators, creators, healers, influencers, and advocates. We are called to leave this universe better than we experienced it. So as I close today's conversation, I want to encourage you to rest like a revolutionary. I want to reiterate something that we all know, and then I want to say something that might piss some of us off. Right now, we're witnessing a growing wave of unrest in this country. White Americans are on the street protesting. They out there, they raising hell about, get your hands off our shit. And they are watching the bubbles that they once felt protecting in bursting. But what about us, Black America? What about you? Are you sitting in the corner of this country's collapse, checked out, or scrolling through the chaos as if this shit is not eventually going to come for us too? We say we're engaging in self-care, but if we're to be honest, sometimes we're not engaging in the kind of self-care that restores our spiritual vision or heals our hearts and minds. Instead, it's the kind of rest that is really just avoidance wrapped in Netflix and recreation. And I ain't got no problem with it, because sometimes I put my music on and I have my afternoon dance too to keep encouraged. Another thing that I've been hearing lately is we've been through this before. Black folks know how to survive this. I'm going to say stop lying to yourself, because unless you were part of the baby boomer era, we don't know shit. Some of us don't really understand true racial discrimination and struggle. Not that Jim Crow kind of shit. We don't know it because we're too comfortable. So I cannot overemphasize this enough. This moment requires you. It requires me. I'm talking to all of us who are the extraordinary, those of us who think there's nothing unique about us. I'm wanting those extraordinary people to come out and be extraordinary. As Kendrick Lamar said, sometimes you got to pop out and show them. So I want to challenge you to stop resting just to escape because you're frustrated and tired. Start resting to prepare for evolution. Start resting to heal the trauma that's been passed through our bloodline, to remember the agreements made long before we came here in physical form. Start resting to reclaim the kind of power that doesn't need permission from a social or political system that was never built for us anyway. And so to do that, I'm going to suggest that we practice a few things. First, turn off the historical noise so we can hear the wisdom of ourselves. I'm recovering from what was stolen, my breath, my body, my belief in me. I want us to create and hold space, not just for peace, but for strategizing. I'm returning to my center so I can remember my sacred journey. I want us to read the stories of our unsung ancestral warriors and remember that you too are carrying a piece of their unfinished work. I'm not resting to avoid my calling. I'm resting to prepare for it. And lastly, as things continue to unravel, try to resist moving in panic or inflated fear. And while others protest for the first time, let's keep in mind our ancestors passed on to us a blueprint that flows through our DNA. We got to show up in all of our history, not just the part that makes us feel shiny and special. When I think about this, the DNA that's within us, I think about Darwin's evolution theory, the survival of the fittest. I'm not talking about being the strongest and the most dominant. That's social Darwinism. And that was a theory of a whole nother asshole, okay? Darwin's original theory of evolution is about being the most adaptable. Those who learn to adjust, endure, evolve in the face of the harshest conditions. That's exactly what the hell African Americans have been doing for generations. Despite living in a system not designed for us, we've adapted culturally, spiritually, and creatively. Our resolve isn't about passive suffering, but active transformation. We've adapted through the power of grabbing the baton from the ancestor before us to keep running this race. Even when the system has tried to make us forget, we reach back, we get that damn baton, and we keep moving forward. So let's rest like we're preparing. It's our turn to adapt and evolve. 2 truths, 1 legacy. We've been wounded and we're being summoned in preparation to shift, to grow, to keep creating space for our truth in a world obsessed with erasing it. I appreciate you for sharing this space with me. I hope you will keep listening and join me in creating your own expressions of sacred activism. All right, so if this episode has resonated with you, I'm asking you to leave me a comment. Better yet, subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend about it. Because I want to know that while I'm growing, I know this cannot be done overnight. I'm not going to get the growth overnight or the numbers, but I'd love to be able to see just one tick. In a couple of months, I am going to release the revised version of my book, giving myself permission, putting fear and doubt in their place. I'm going to start reviewing some of the things that I've written in that book, a part of my calling that I dropped because I was afraid. All right. I'm just going to be honest. But I've been resting with purpose and I picked up the baton and I now realize what my assignment is. You can also follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and on YouTube. I'm going to be doing better with my YouTube because once I finish the book, y'all give me a break. I got to finish my book first. Because I'm the timeline or the drop date is coming soon. And I need to finish that so I can get that big thing off my plate to start the next phase of this. All right. And then also remember to visit my website, penniemurray.com, and get on my email list so that you can receive notification and upcoming events and other things that I've got planned to be able to share wisdom and thoughts of encouragement. And click on the Learning Spa tab to learn about my vision of prioritizing inner wellness in the African American community and donate to our building fund. Maybe instead of that, that cup of Starbucks coffee, you could throw that $5 over to my way. I'm sure Starbucks got enough money. And that's what we need to start doing in our own community. Maybe once a week, giving $5 to an African-American business, just $5. Okay. So until next time, take the time to reflect, to breathe, and to reclaim your sacred expressive life force because the revolution begins inside you. And as always, remember, you are never the victim of life. You are always the student of purpose. So what skill or higher consciousness are you learning? What task or message are you being prepared to deliver? Ashe.